Okay, this video is to make sure that we all understand how to work through the financing of a cash flow producing property using a lease instead of a mortgage. Okay, so I'm going to go through the example that we talked about a bit during class, Apex Apartments. And as usual, we have all of our base data on one page, everything we're going to need to refer to that might change as a result of the lender making a change or your managing director making a change. So you have it here and you don't hard code it in later on. Okay, so the first thing that we're going to have to do is figure out the terms of the lease and how those work through for the sponsor. As with a mortgage, the lender drives everything, the lender in this case being the lessor. So CMO's strategy is going to be, as it was with the mortgage, manage for 5 years and then exit. Okay. Um, and the purchase price of the building, not including any fees, is still 4.2 million and change. And now we're positing that they have compared lenders and they have settled on a leasing company. They're gonna lease the building. So this presumes the leasing company went ahead and bought the building from CAG instead of CMO. And CMO is going to get the exclusive use of this building from the leasing company for a term certain. Okay. So this is going to be a capital lease, okay, and depreciation for this lease is going to be over the life of the lease. The lease term is 20 years with no early exit penalty. Um, and the principal of this lease, which is the present value of all the lease payments at the lessor's interest rate, is $2 million. And the lessor's interest rate is 10%. And the uniform annual payment we're going to figure out. And as you can see, because this says equal I-26, when we get the right thing in I-26, this will automatically be filled in. And the points that the lessor is going to charge, which are going to be paid at the beginning of the lease at t equals 0, are $40,000. Okay, so as usual, very, very similar to a mortgage. The lessor is going to know the PV they want. They're going to know the duration. They're going to know the interest rate that they want to charge, and they're probably going to know what type of points they're charging up front, and they're going to task um, an intern or early stage employee with finding out what the uniform annual payment is. So we've got that to work out down here. And remember with a lease, the lease payments are always made at the beginning of the period, which is the same thing as the end of the prior period. So for the first year, CMO is going to have to make a payment at the beginning, the very beginning of the first year, for the right to use that building during the year. So when is that going to happen? That's beginning of first year, same thing as end of year 0. Okay. So we have no idea what this uniform payment should be. I'm going to say something like 100,000. Oh, whoops, sorry, don't want to do that there. Not at t equals 0, I want to put it down here. Okay, and this is uniform pay, amortizing lease, so every payment is going to be equal to every other payment. So I put that in, and let's reduce this by an order of magnitude to 100,000. That's more like it for a 20-year lease. Um, and we know the interest rate is 10%, so I'm guessing at what these payments are. And down here, I've got, using our usual PV formula, I've got the present value of each of these payments. I can do a quick check on that by putting 0 in there. If there is 0 interest rate, there is no time value of money. The present value of all the payments is equal to the payments themselves. So it looks like I've got the right formula in there. So I'll put the 10% back, and down here I want to sum them all up. And why do I want to sum them all up? Because the lessor knows that she wants that sum to be equal to $2 million for reasons that we discussed during class. Again here, as usual, I can keep trying to guess this um, until I get the present value at 10% to be equal to 2 million, but I'm too lazy to do that, and that takes too long for me. So I'm going to go to data what if analysis goal seek as usual. So I want to set that PV to $2 million. And how do I do that? By changing my guess at the uniform payment. Okay, and I get 213,563. Okay, so far so good. So we know our annual lease payment, completely analogous to finding the annual mortgage payment for a mortgage. Okay, and the at t equals 0, end of y0, we sign this contract. So the principal is, as defined up above, our 2 million. And take that comma out of there. And unlike a mortgage, here at time t equals 0, we are going to make a payment, okay, to get, CMO is going to make a payment to get the right to use the space for the first year. So now I want to say equal to, I want to point up to either I-26 or E20. I'll point to E20, um, and that's going to be constant. So I'm going to lock that down with dollar signs. Um, the interest portion of the payment, how much time has elapsed for the principal to accrue interest? 0. Okay, so that means no interest. Um, the amortization portion of this payment is therefore the whole thing. So that's going to be equal to, as usual, the total payment minus the interest portion, which since there was no interest, it's 100%. Okay, and now what's the lease principal? As usual, it's the principal at the beginning of the period minus the amount that was amortized here. Okay, and I think everything that I have here is a pretty general formula, except for this. I need to say that principal at end of period 1 is the same sorry, beginning of period 1 is the same as end of period 0, but I think all the rest is pretty general unless I made a mistake. So I can copy these over. Um, and it does look like something is wrong here. And why is something wrong? That's because I need to go look up what my interest portion of, I need to compute here what my interest portion of the payment is, which is going to be equal to the principal amount at the beginning of the period times the interest rate, which I can point to in a lot of places. I'm going to try and point, always good to point to the earliest instance of something you can find. So I'll point to that. Um, and let's see what happens here. I still might have a problem with positive or negative signs, but no, I think not. How do I know I've got it right? I know I've got it right because for these uniform pay leases or mortgages, the beauty of these amortizing instruments is at the very end, um, there is no more principal to be paid off. So if you got everything right, your principal should go to zero. Why is the end at 19? This is a 20-year lease. Did I make a big mistake? No, remember, we're always paying at the beginning of the period for the use of the property during that period. So this is paid off at end of year 19, unlike a mortgage, which would be paid off at end of year 20 if it were a 20-year mortgage. Okay, so far so good. So now we're ready to look at how they're going to do operating this property. And it looks like I should have erased something here that I didn't. So I'm just going to delete that and then get all our comprehensive cash flows together and compute an NPV, etc. Okay, so their strategy remains that they want to operate this property for 5 years and then exit. So for operating the property and exiting, we've got everything we need on this page as previously stated. So I'm going to walk us through the key things that are different than they would have been if we had a mortgage. Okay, so starting with operating, to get to before tax cash flows, so we can get to operating tax and after tax cash flows. We start with our NOI as usual, and then from that we have to subtract our lease payment. Okay, so here we do have the lease payment at T equal 0 to give them the right to use the property for the year. So I want to put that in. Okay. And that's going to be the same for all years, except, oops, look what's going on here. If they made this payment, this would be made at the end of year 5 or the beginning of year 6 for the right to use the property in year 6. But they have the right to and are planning to leave this lease at end of year 5 with no penalty. So they're not going to make that payment. So I want to put 0 in there, which, as we note, increases their before tax cash flow by a big blob. Okay. Um, all right, and now we're ready to get the tax on operations. And just as with a mortgage, we start with NOI and we make two adjustments. The IRS allows us to deduct depreciation and interest on our lease, assuming it's a capital lease. Okay, so what's depreciation? I have no idea. So we're going to go back to where we set up the lease and suss it out. Okay, it's a capital lease, so it will have depreciation. Operating leases do not. It would be good to spell capital correctly, but that's another story. And you're told here that the depreciation for taxes is over the life of the lease, which is 20 years. Okay, so the depreciation for lease is always PV divided by either the life of the lease or that 27.5 or 39. And we need to be told if it's over life of the lease or not. So it is here. So let me go back here and let me say equal minus my PV divided by the lease term. Yep, that's looking good. Um, and I've got that. Okay, and I'll say this guy is equal to that guy. Okay, and my interest here, of course, my interest at t equals 0, my NOI at t equals 0, my taxable income t equals 0, all 0. But what interest did I pay in the first year? I got to go back to my lease roll forward table, and I see that in year 1, the interest portion of my payment was 178, 644, and I'll just roll that ahead. And now I think I can fill all of these in. Okay, I did. This is actually the amount of interest that I did pay, or CMO did pay, in year 5, and this is the depreciation that can be claimed for year 5. So I think that's all looking pretty good. Well, if for marginal tax rate in year 0, I think we can say NA because there's no positive or negative taxable income. And so we can say NA there too, or a 0. And so now I really want a real number for marginal tax rate. So I'm going to have to go back to base data. Marginal tax rate synonym for income tax rate. And so I find it here at base data. Um, and here I'll just say equal to that one, and they're all the same. Nice to explicitly put that tax rate in every year, because that way if the tax rate changes from year to year, we can go ahead and make that change easily without having to redo our whole model from scratch. Okay, so now we get here our taxes or savings, which are just simply our taxable income times the tax rate. And as explained in class, we are going to assume whenever we get a negative taxable income that we're going to get a tax refund from the government, which could conceivably even be in cash. And that actually is, it's complicated and beyond the scope of this class, but it is true for entities that have had positive taxable income for years previous and expect to in future years. You actually can get a tax break when you have a bad year. Okay, so I think that's looking good here. And we've got all our taxes filled in, and that allows us to, exactly as we did with the case of a mortgage, get our after-tax cash flows from operations to the sponsor. Notice again, we have the big blob here in the end, and the reason for that is we're not making a mortgage payment, sorry, a lease payment at end of year 5 for the use of the property in year 6. Um, the ratio analysis, I'm not going to worry about here. It's exactly the same as it was for the case of the mortgage, essentially, exactly the same. Um, I'll let you look at that on your own. All the formulas are there if you want to look up anything. And now we're ready to get the comprehensive cash flows to equity and value the project for equity. We don't have to worry about selling and depreciation recovery tax and capital gains tax because CMO does not own this building, right? CMO is just getting the exclusive use of this building. And also important to note that there's no early exit penalty for CMO. So it is just able to end this lease whenever it wants to, and it doesn't have to make any big payments or anything like that along the way. So with that in mind, let's get all our comprehensive cash flows for the sponsor. So the operating after-tax cash flow we just computed, that's going to be here, and notice how we have a big negative after-tax cash flow from operations in the first year. And now we also have lease fees. Those are part of the lease deal, so they're going to be on the enter lease page, and that is 40,000. So I'm just going to make that a negative number. Um, and I don't want to have this twice, so I think that's going to work. Yeah, that looks pretty good. And that payment only happens once, so I don't want to drag that over or anything. Uh, in the real world, the fees can happen whenever they're negotiated to happen and put in the contract. So there could be some here, could be more here, could be some here. It's whatever you negotiate in the commercial real estate world. Okay. Um, so that's all looking good here. And this is the set of comprehensive cash flows. Again, no worrying about sale. Again, no worrying about paying off the remaining principal balance of the mortgage. With a lease, if you have the right to leave early with no penalty, you can just think about it. It's exactly analogous to if you have a rental lease on an apartment and you have the right to break that lease early. You don't have to pay anything. So the assumption here for the lessor is essentially that they can go ahead and release this building basically immediately. So that's why they might agree to terms like that. But it is not uncommon to have terms like that. Okay, so a lot simpler than a mortgage in the exit bit um, here. And now we are ready to go with our valuation. I completely don't remember what the operating cost of capital is for CMO. It's 7%. Um, and so now all I want to do is get the present value of each of their comprehensive cash flows, um, discounted by the opportunity cost of capital rate, and add them up, and that's my NPV, just like it always has been. All right, so here we go. So I've got them all. Um, and let's see. I just add them up because now I've got them all normalized to their value at t equals 0, so I can add them apples to apples, and I get 282, 594, and this means Yahoo model says go. All right. Um, and also, in this case, with these cash flows, we could try to get an IRR. So let's go ahead and do that, and let's use the goal sequence. So we're going to guess at an IRR, and now I'm going to get my PVs using that guess at the IRR. So I take the cash flow divided by 1 plus. Now I want to use my guess at IRR instead of the opportunity cost of capital. And there we go. And I bring all those out. And again, we can do a quick check on this. If I've got everything right, if the IRR is equal to 0, there is no time value, so my cash flows are equal to my present value of the cash flows is equal to the actual cash flows as they happen. Um, and here I say sum of all of these guys. I just add them up. Um, and I want that to be equal to 0. So I'm going to use goalseek for that. So I want to set F64 to 0. by changing cell F62. Okay, and I get that's pretty good IRR. Okay, um, so we say Yahoo again. Um, Okay. And again, as we've stressed throughout this course, when you can do an IRR, um, if your NPV is greater than zero, your IRR should be higher than your cost of capital, and it is here. So that's looking good. Okay. And so that's how we compute everything for a lease, and you'll be able to try it yourself with an assignment shortly.